The TBS Mambo is the newest radio from Team Black Sheep. It's got TBS Tracer built in, which is one of the fastest, lowest latency RC control links you can get. And I'm going to make a review of this radio, but this is not the review of the TBS Mambo, because before I review it, I got to set it up and I got to fly with it for a while. And that means I'm making a video about how to set up your TBS Mambo. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. If you've set up an OpenTX radio before, then you're going to be familiar with a lot of the things that we go over in this video. But there are some things that are unique about the TBS Mambo that you may not be expecting. If you would rather just read a manual, then there's a link down in the video description to the TBS Mambo manual. And TBS makes very good manuals for their products. Just leave this video playing in the background so my analytics don't get tanked by you clicking away and not watching the rest of the video. Just mute the video, let it play, just let it play. Hurts no one, helps my analytics. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the batteries. The TBS Mambo doesn't come with its own batteries. The batteries that we're going to use are these 18650 cells, and make sure that you install them the right way around. The manual says that, well, the manual doesn't say you'll blow up the radio if you put them in the wrong way, but it does say be sure you put them in the right way. The positive end is this end with a little kind of nub, and the negative end is the flat end. And it looks like they both go in facing the same direction, so we're going to put them in minus to positive.
Welcome to Mambo.
Ooh. Now, you saw there on the window... Thanks. You saw there on the screen that the TBS Mambo runs FreedomTX. And FreedomTX is a TBS custom build of OpenTX. It's a fork of OpenTX. So everything you know from OpenTX is going to be pretty familiar here. TBS does intend to roll the changes in FreedomTX back into OpenTX. The OpenTX project is a little slow to incorporate new changes. So for the time being, you're not going to be able to use OpenTX tools like OpenTX Companion, and you're not going to flash the radio the normal way you would with an OpenTX radio. And if you have models and settings that you've built in OpenTX, like you have a Radio Master radio, you will not be able to directly copy those over. You will be setting this up from scratch. At some point in the future, that will hopefully change, and this will run a standard build of OpenTX, but for now, that is not the case. And the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in USB, and I'm going to flash the firmware. And we're going to do that by choosing USB agent and click the button. And the user manual for the Mambo says to update the firmware, use TBS Agent X, which you can see here is a desktop application that's used to flash and manage TBS products. But as of the time I'm recording this, there is a problem with TBS Agent X when used to flash Crossfire Tracer devices, and it means that when you try to bind, the binding doesn't work. So TBS is recommending, at least for now, that we use this alternative tool, TBS Agent M, which is an online version, a web-based, a browser-based version of the same thing. At some point in the future, that advice may change, but that's what we're going to do in this video. In TBS Agent M, you need to click this Connect to Devices button. You're going to choose the device and hit Connect, and here we go. And we should just go ahead and update all of them if possible. So we'll go to Firmware, and it looks like we are not on the current. It looks like there's one release here, V130. We may as well update. So we'll go ahead and do that. We need to click this button one more time and then connect again. And with TBS Agent M, if you click away from the tab, like you put the tab in the background, it stops updating. So we'll just need to let this sit. Alrighty, that's done. And we'll go ahead and reconnect with USB Agent. We'll go back here and we'll reconnect. And we should also update the tracer module firmware. So there's two firmware in here. One is the radio operating system and one is the firmware for the module. And you definitely want to do this. You can see it's shipped with 515, which is a pre-release firmware. 607 is required to, well, basically you want to be on 607 or newer. So we'll hit update here. And once again, connect via USB. And connect. Next, it's a good idea to do a stick calibration on any new radio. It's not always necessary, but it's sometimes necessary, and it doesn't take long. To do that, I'm going to long press the menu key to get to the Tools page, and then I'm going to page until I get to the Hardware page, and here where it says Sticks, I'm going to highlight Calibration and click the jog wheel. And we can calibrate both of these at the same time. It's a little different than the way that OpenTX does it if you've never done it before. We're going to start by centering both sticks.
3, 2.
And it's going to count.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3.
We're going to go around in a circle like this. And then we'll move them in a plus pattern. And likewise there. And we are good. I do want to warn you, when you do stick calibration like this, be as gentle as possible when pushing the stick up and down. There's just a little bit of flex at the top, bottom, and outside extremes of the stick movement. And if you press super hard while you're calibrating, then the radio will expect you to press super hard all the time, and you won't do that, and you won't actually get the full stick travel. So be as gentle as you can be when going through those movements. Now this radio comes shipped in mode 2, which means that the throttle is on the left, and that is how the majority of people around the world fly. But if you need a different stick mode, you can get to that by long pressing menu to get to Tools, and then page to Radio Setup, and scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we can change the mode. Oh, went too far. There we go. We can change the mode from mode 2 to mode 1 and so forth. If you do that, you will also need to open up the back of the radio, and you'll need to change which side is the throttle, because the throttle is not spring-loaded, and there are instructions for how to do that in the Mambo manual. The next thing to do is to bind the radio to my receiver, and I've got a tracer receiver already installed in this quadcopter. If you need to know how to set up a tracer receiver, how to wire it up, and more details about setting up TBS Crossfire or TBS Tracer, I've got a video about how to do that. I'll put a link down in the video description. If you are new to Crossfire and Tracer, you absolutely should watch that video, because there are going to be some details in here that we're not going to get into in this more radio-focused video. In order to put the radio into binding mode, I'm going to long press the menu button, and I'm going to highlight TBS Agent Light in the Tools menu, and then click the jog wheel. And then I'm going to highlight Mambo Tracer and click the jog wheel. And then I'm going to highlight Bind and click the jog wheel. And now we'll do it one more time. Enter to execute. So we're not actually binding yet. I'm going to hit Enter, and the radio is now in progress. It is binding. Then I'm going to power up the quad, and if your tracer receiver is factory fresh and brand new, then it will automatically enter binding mode when you first power it up, and binding should just complete. But since this receiver has been used before, it's not going to do that, and I'm going to need to manually press the bind button on the receiver. After I hit the bind button on the receiver, I will get this prompt in the radio: update micro RX, confirmation needed. Hit enter and let that happen. After you click the button, the update will begin, and you should see an status bar show the percent completion. It'll say RX is loading, don't interrupt. And while it says that, there will be a fast flashing green LED on the receiver. At this point, do not power cycle the receiver. And then it should say binding OK and show solid green LED on the receiver. And when you back out to TBS Agent Light, you should see 3 devices: Mambo Tracer, Mambo Wi-Fi, and Tracer Nano RX. That confirms that you are bound. Now the next thing you're going to need to do is configure your flight controller so that it is seeing the signal from your receiver. And again, I've got instructions for how to do that in the full TBS Crossfire and Tracer setup video linked down below. But in short, you'll need to have Serial RX enabled for one of your UARTs, whichever UART number the receiver is connected to. And then here in the configuration tab, you'll need to have Crossfire selected as your serial receiver protocol. And at that point, when you come here to the receiver tab, you should see movement when you move your sticks you should see movement there here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to plug in this quadcopter, and here in Betaflight we'll set up our flight modes, and it couldn't be simpler. Well, for arm we'll just hit add range, and then I'm going to flip my arm switch, which usually is going to be the shoulder to position. I'm going to put that switch into the arming position, which will say it's not picking it up. The switch I want to use is mapped to channel 9, but we only have 8 channels, so that's too bad. So we will have to set these up after all. So I'm going to short press the menu key one time, and I'm going to page to the mixes screen. Oh, I overshot. Do you see I pressed the page key too many times? I can just long press page to go back one screen. Here in the mixes, I'm going to go down to channel 5, and I'm going to long press the jog wheel and click for edit. I'm going to go down to where it says source and click, and it will begin to flash, indicating that it is being edited. And then I'm just going to press that switch one time, which will now map that switch to this channel. And you can see now when I flick that switch, aux1 moves. I will then go to the modes tab. I will hit add range for arm and click that switch one time. That will cause this to fill in with aux1, the channel that's moving. And when I click that switch, you'll see this little yellow tick mark go back and forth, indicating that this channel is controlling this mode. And then I'm going to put the switch in the arm position, which I guess should be like pressed in. Yeah, that makes sense. Press in to arm. I'm going to drag this over so it's on top of the little yellow tick mark and hit save. And then that switch will be controlling our arming. Let's go back to the receiver tab. Let's see. Now switch D is usually the one I use for my angle mode and turtle mode. And you can see that that is moving channel aux4. So we're good there. We don't need to remap anything in the mixes screen. We'll go back to modes. For angle mode, I'll hit add range. I'll flip that switch one time. It will pick up aux4 right here. And moving that switch will move the little yellow tick mark here. I'm going to have angle mode be my middle position. I'm going to move, well, I don't need to move this yellow slider because it's already covering that position, and hit save. And now angle mode will be middle position on switch D. And then the other thing I like to do is have turtle mode or crash flip be the down position. So I'll hit add range for flip over crash, flip the switch, it'll pick up aux4. The switch is in the down position. I'm going to move this to cover the little yellow tick mark and save. And then this momentary switch here I usually use for my buzzer. We'll go back to the receiver tab and we'll see if that, so that switch is not doing anything when I press it. So here in the radio I will hit exit to back out to the main menu all the way here. Short press menu one time. Page to the mixes screen. And which channels are we using? We've got aux4 for this switch and aux1 for this switch. So let's pick channel 6, which is aux2. You see count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Channel 6 is aux2. I'm going to long press and click to edit. Scroll down to source and click once, and I'm going to hit that switch here and it will pick that up as the source for channel 6. Then I'm going to exit out. And now when I press that switch, channel 6 or aux2 will move. And I'll go to the modes tab and I'm going to find my buzzer mode or beeper. I can't remember what they call it. There it is. Add range and press that. It picks it up here as aux2. And I'm moving that little yellow tick mark. And I'm going to move this over to this side. And when I press the button, that little yellow tick mark moves to where this yellow range is, causing the mode to activate. And then let's just double check. We'll do hide unused modes, and we can see arm, disarm. It's working correctly. Up is nothing, angle mode, and flip crash, and beeper. Now if we go back to the receiver tab, there's another thing that needs to be fixed, and that is you see this 3D model is flipping out. That's because my channel mapping is not correct. Notice that when I move the throttle on the left stick, the roll channel is moving. That's easy to fix. You can manually rearrange the A, E, T, and R here in the channel map. You could just type them in whatever order is correct, but usually one of the default orders will work. So I'm going to try the spectrum default order and hit save. And throttle is correct, yaw is correct, roll is correct, and pitch is correct. So that one just happens to be right. And we'll check our endpoints here. 988 to 2011, 988 to 2011. Yeah, we'll need to fix that. Here's how we fix that. We want the endpoints to be 1000 to 2000. And the way to fix that is I will short press the menu key and page to the outputs screen. I'm going to highlight channel 1 and click and edit. And I'm going to go to min and change min to, I think negative 97 is correct. 97, yeah, that's the throttle. Notice the throttle is at 1004. We're going to just, there we go, 97.7. We're just going to set the min and the max to 97.7 for all of the 4 channels. And that should, yeah, that should get us pretty close to 1000 and 2000. So I'm going to hit exit one time. And again, I'm going to go down to channel 2, edit. And again, I'm going to change the min and max to 97.7. I don't know why you have to do this on all OpenTX radios. This is not just the Mambo. On all OpenTX radios, for some reason, the endpoints are not right. Now, we should have, when we move our sticks, the channels should go from 1000 to 2000. It's not quite 2000, it's 1999, but it's pretty close. 1000 to 1999, 1000 to 1999. That's pretty darn close. Once you've got your endpoints working correctly, the other thing you can do is here in the stick low threshold, change the stick low threshold to 1010. The default is 1050, which causes there to be just a little bit of dead space at the bottom of your throttle. And since you've got your endpoints set correctly now, you can get rid of that. Now at this point, you could go and fly, but I want to show you just a couple more little options in here that you might want to know about. In order to get to them, I'm going to long press menu. I'm going to highlight TBS Agent Light and click. And I'm going to go down to Mambo Tracer. And then I'm going to go to General. And you'll see here in General, the max power is 100 milliwatts. And 100 milliwatts is enough range for some people, but if you want the maximum possible range, we will change that from 100 milliwatts to 1 watt. Now you're going to want to leave dynamic power on. If you turn dynamic power off, then it will be at 1 watt all the time, and it'll suck your batteries down really quickly, your Mambo batteries. By having dynamic power on, it keeps the power low when you're close in and only increases the power to 1 watt when you get further out, and that's going to save you some battery power. You'll see here another option is the TX antenna, internal versus external. If you want the maximum possible range out of your TBS Mambo, you can pop out this little circle right here. You have to drill it out yourself, and you can install an external 2.4 gigahertz antenna. If you chose to do that, you would change this TX antenna from internal to external. Don't change that if you haven't installed an antenna, because sometimes that will, I don't know if that's true for this specific radio, but on a lot of radios, trying to use an antenna that isn't there will damage the radio amplifier and burn it out. So don't change that, but that's what that option is there for. We're going to just stay on internal. If we go back to the main TBS Agent Light screen and highlight Tracer Nano RX, we can change the receiver options. And one of the things you might think about changing there is this mode. The default mode is 8-channel, but it can be changed to 12-channel, and that will get you the remaining aux channels. That, remember when I tried to set up the switches, some of the switches weren't doing anything because we only had 8 channels in total, 4 aux channels. By changing from 8-channel to 12-channel mode, you get 12 channels instead of 8, but some other aspect of the performance of the system changes, and TBS won't say what it is. We know from Mark Spatz's testing that the latency stays the same when you go from 8 to 12 channel mode, but you can't get something for nothing. The best guess is that you're going to get shorter range, but no one has confirmed this. So unless you absolutely need those additional aux channels, leave it in 12-channel mode. But if you absolutely need those additional aux channels, you can switch Tracer from 8 to 12-channel mode. And yeah, that's it. You're basically ready to go fly, and that is what I'm going to do I'm going to go give this a fly and see how it performs in getting ready to do a full review of this radio. Now, if you've watched this far, you probably already own this radio, so you're not that interested in a review of it. But if you want to see my thoughts about this radio in a review, make sure you get subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of that info. I've also got some more links down below to other OpenTX setup videos that I've done if you want to get a little bit deeper into how to set this radio up, and a few other resources that I think you might be interested in. They're down in the video description, so definitely check them out. Thanks so much for watching. Happy flying. What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon, or like just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez.